Well, this is Stalcraft, a game with which I have sunk about 100 hours into in a pretty short amount of time, and a game with which I have pretty mixed feelings about. But before we get into that, what exactly is Stalcraft? Stalcraft is a MMORPG PvP/PVE game that is based upon the themes and universe of the Stalker series, with the presentation and gameplay style similar to Minecraft. However, unlike Minecraft, this game is utilizing the Unreal Engine, and you can just tell simply by the footage that it actually looks quite good for a block-style game. The mutant design in Stalcraft is pretty interesting, the way that they've had their own take on how some of them would be kind of different looking. The weapon animations at the moment, a few of them are quite nice and crisp. There are a few that have issues, but in the future the developers are working to update the animations, specifically of the character movement, which at the moment pretty much resembles Minecraft. Now, to make room for this being a multiplayer game, the developers have taken the liberty at expanding most of the areas that were in the original Stalker series. For example, this base, Photon 2, is the second safe zone for the bandit faction in the game. This is about northwest of the railway embankment in the cordon. Now, the base looks quite empty, but that is because the character I am playing on has a higher level than what most of the players that would be using Photon 2 as a safe zone would actually be at. By this point in the game, my character is more familiar with the bar. The bar kind of becomes the central hub of most players in the later half of the game. It's just about center of the actual zone in terms of the map layout, and this is where you're going to spend most of your time, like I said, in the later half of the game, grinding for more advanced resources, gear, weapons, etc., but more on the bar later. Stalcraft features a main story questline and plenty of side quests, some of which are exclusive to free stalkers and some of which are exclusive to bandits. However, because Stalcraft is a PvP game, you will find plenty of instances, whether you're just running around in the free roam of the map, or you're doing specific side quests that require you to go into hostile territory, or most of all, the main questline, which will teleport you to very hostile hotspots, let's put it, that as soon as you pretty much show up, if someone is just running right through a level change and they happen to come across you, they're going to shoot you on sight.
And we've gotten through the little nightmare section after that and gotten back. So at the beginning of the next episode, we're going to start working on the path to the radar. I'm pretty sure that's the name of it. So if this video helps you at all, go ahead.
No. Now this brings me into my next point about the PvP and the more static nature of the zone and the faction dynamics. Unlike Tarkov or DayZ, the actual in-game VoIP is only for your squad, which the controls actually make kind of misleading because it says VoIP, but there is no proximity communication. It is purely for your squad. In order to communicate with hostile players, you have to use in proximity the in-game prompts, which take about a second to show up, and you can't really do anything while you're trying to select a prompt. The point I'm trying to make is that the game essentially boils down to a running simulator and a team deathmatch. And it becomes more of a team deathmatch the farther you progress through the game, the more equipment, the better weapons you get, the better armors that you get. It really just becomes a pure team deathmatch through and through the moment that you see an enemy player. Sometimes in the beginning you can kind of sneak by other players. One, maybe they're a little bit less aware because they're newer to the game, or two, they're just trying to focus on doing a side quest or farming loot or something like that. Now, while I don't actually hate the PvP in this game, I understand why it exists. It's Stalker, there's different factions, I understand. I just find that the PvP as it exists currently to be nothing more than a griefing tool that halts or blocks other players' progression. So in order to progress in the game, you need to go through what is essentially a bartering tree, where you have to gather resources in the world from events, whether you have to kill mutants for certain materials, or AI stalkers for others, or hunting for stashes. That's how you essentially progress through the game and get better equipment. And the equipment is separated into different tiers, like you've seen in plenty of other games. You've got worn, you've got, you've basically colors. You've got the green, blue, and purple. And as you get better equipment, and as from what I understand, as soon as you reach purple gear, you are essentially placed in the top end of the game. And the farther you even get into the purple tier, the even better kitted out other players will be. Now this brings me back to the PvP element, and this is what I mean by it's a griefing tool. When you kill players who have the crafting materials on them, if they're not the purple color, which is essentially a bundle that you can trade on the auction, which we'll get to the auction in a minute. So basically you have to kill other players and grab what is called a lost backpack, and then you have to mail it back to them because you can't actually take those crafting materials that are of like the green color basically for yourself. So killing other players, the only thing you're really going to get out of it is medkits, ammo, artifacts, which you can just do plenty of passive grinding and questing, and you don't even really need to sell artifacts for a quick buck. You make plenty from just all the junk that you find that you can sell to the fence. So PvP, again, is essentially a griefing tool. What's the point in killing players if you can't even take their materials? The PvP in this game is already constant as it is. I don't really see a reason that making it that you could take other people's crafting materials would somehow encourage even more toxicity or PvP. Again, it doesn't make sense to me, and I'm sure plenty of other players in the game kind of feel this way. And this also applies to your weapons. Because you're going through a bartering tree, you can't just go and buy an AK or something. If you die, you keep your weapons on you, especially because there's also named and special weapons. There's a lot of items that are bound to use. Ammo pouches, when you die, you don't lose the ammo pouches. You lose the ammo that you can unpack from the pouches to use in your inventory. When you die again, you'll drop those. But there's bound items, and that also kind of means that like the PvP can kind of keep on going, and there's no reason for people to not do it as long as they can buy ammo, which you can make plenty of rubles to buy even basic ammo to kill someone with just repeated headshots from a really high DPS SMG or one shot from a sniper rifle. Now, as I mentioned, the auction house, basically with the auction, when you kill a player and say they have a lot of aluminum cable on them or copper wire, which you can only find specifically the aluminum wire in 2 places in the game, and copper wire in the dump. Basically what you can do is take their backpack and extort the other player for multitudes of thousands of rubles in order for them to get their resources back. So again, the PvP element is only really to just extort other players for rubles, which the whole point of progressing through the game is that it's kind of easy to get rubles, but not so easy to get crafting materials. So the gameplay loop is just really weird in how the PvP is kind of forced in this game. Not to mention the weird kind of mini faction. They're called the Diggers. They are central in the dump in this little tunnel here. Have a couple of side quests and main quest points where you need to run in and out of there. So you have to YOLO rush this area with whatever you have on you and pray to God that you don't get killed by a player who's camping the area. Because sometimes the world events, the AI, whether they're bandit or loners, will actually be protecting it, and it'll allow one faction to kind of camp it more than the other. It's just a really, really stupid, not well thought out mechanic. And this brings me back to the bar. The bar has 2 entrances, one for loner territory and one for bandit territory, but each side can cross over to the other side's territory through some alternate routes in order to farm pickles, and pickles are a resource you can only get from the enemy faction's territory in Rostock, the factory region, by killing the AI. So it forces PvP in a way that is just kind of unnecessary, because other players are just trying to go run back to different areas to do side quests, and you're getting killed by people that are camping in either weirdly questionable spots or just roaming around just slaughtering literally everybody, and it's just so stupid. Now, my last point about the actual PvP environment is that this game, while it is now on Steam and should have VAC protections, there is a little bit of a cheating problem in this game. I've seen it from other players and a couple of other reviewers and stuff. As a matter of fact, I even know a couple of people who can quite easily and have made trainers for this game. I have run into a couple of cases where I felt like I was being literally wall hacked through. People just ran right up to me. They had no idea where I was hiding, could see me nothing, and were just running right up to me and shooting me. And then also another case where I was just running along the train tracks in the forest, and I got almost instantaneously melted by a guy with a Ventores, and it was out of proximity range and was through all of the trees, just all of the possible concealment that there would be. So Cheating wise, I don't think most people are cheating. I think that it is definitely possible, and I think a couple of times firsthand I've experienced that there is definitely a difference between good awareness and just straight up just running right to you and shooting you right in the face, or shooting you in perfectly in the head through, just like I said, multitudes of concealment. Anyways, this brings me to my really final point about the PvP, and that's about the faction dynamic. And that is, well, like I said, it was a team deathmatch game pretty much, and I think that the game could benefit from a different faction dynamic. So the way that it works is that there are sub-factions, and the sub-factions are basically endgame different factions that you can join that have very specific equipment that they have, or weapons. And I just don't really understand the reason for them to even exist that way, because like the end game, in my opinion, is more of like the areas that you go to, not really necessarily the factions. So the way that I honestly would frame the factions to work better in this game is that the factions are similar to how they are in Anomaly, where you can choose between quite a number of factions and have like a different play through experience depending on the faction, because each faction has their own different goals and territories that they own. Like, for example, I think that the entirety of Rostock should be redesigned to be the duty base, like it is in normal Stalker lore, and that duty players can essentially enforce a more safe area for people to go in and out of the bar with, whether that's hunting mutants or having mutant-like defenses and stuff like that, and actually having something to do other than what everyone else does, which is just run around, collect the same kind of loot, and blah, 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 blah. I actually think the core of the loot grind kind of makes sense, the crafting materials grind for how the game was built. I just don't think that there's enough of an interesting dynamic that really makes this the MMO that it could be. I just think that the only reason for this game to even be multiplayer is just kind of arbitrary, and I think that this entire game could actually exist as a completely single-player experience and just be essentially a more easy-to-run Stalker. That, in my honest opinion, I think that the game could easily have been just straight-up single-player co-op. I don't think that the PvP in Stalcraft can actually keep players engaged unless they are specifically looking to fight other players. There are plenty of other different titles and mods and fan-made games and stuff like that that already kind of have that environment where you can choose to be a bandit like in DayZ, or you can choose to help other people and be a pacifist or whatever. There's plenty of role-playing opportunities in all these other different games and mods, and I don't think Stalcraft really does that well. I feel like there's almost a facade that it is supposed to be an RPG game, but like I said, it boils down to just being team deathmatch. While I do enjoy Stalcraft, and I am honestly quite amazed by what the, I think, 100 or so team of Russian developers have made with this game over almost a decade of work, most of that time being spent on just a Russian client of the game, I think that the game really does suffer in some aspects, mainly the relation between the PvP and the PvE and the environment. And what I mean by that is either the PvP has to be sacrificed a little bit for the sake of the PvE experience, or the other way around. For example, I think that Rostock could feature the arena like an actual Stalker, and the arena could be an area where you're actually PvPing, or the North, which the North has these areas that are wild territories, and basically only your squad is friendly. And when you go up to the North, you are essentially consenting to PvP. Like, you're not going there to really farm just whatever. It is PvP. It is the most dangerous area in the zone. And I think the way that the game is built mostly, I feel like the PvP would have to be sacrificed just a little bit in order to make the overall game experience better. That's not me trying to be biased and say that I want a more casual experience, because I mean, I really don't. The game has its challenges even in the PvE world. I just don't think that the way that some of the game is structured and how you have to progress in some aspects is really making the gameplay better in any way for most of the people that are going to play this game and expect a certain experience. In my honest opinion, I think that the game could benefit for some restructuring, and I understand that these things take time. I am no game developer myself. I am totally aware that it's not so simple, especially with how much the game has been built up already. But I do think if the developers took a really dedicated look into how the game is kind of progressing already, I think they could take some pretty good steps into changing how the maps are set up a little bit and how the factions work, and maybe make it that the sub-factions aren't necessarily an end game thing, but the North itself is the end game. For instance, like a player can join the Ecologists and they can go and hunt for artifacts and be more neutral to most of the factions in the game, and they can use the auction house to sell the artifacts to players of other factions to utilize for whatever goals that they might have. Like that's role playing. That's having different goals, not just like a weird, slightly symmetric but also asymmetric experience between the loners and the bandits. Now, for recommending Stalcraft, I can't really give a straight up yes or no. It kind of comes down to each individual player. If you cannot run the Anomaly sandbox and its mod packs, whether you're playing Gamma or Escape from Pripyat or whatever, I would say that you can definitely pick up Stalcraft and it'll be pretty interesting. I mean, the game on like even a potato runs pretty decently well. Not like super old potato, but like a computer that I just recently modified. I put an old 1060 in it, and it went from running at 4 frames a second to a solid 60 with pretty medium, middle of the road graphics settings. So the game does definitely run on a lot of lower end hardware, and we're at a point in time where I think most people aren't using really extremely old, out of date hardware that can actually access these kinds of games. So again, if you cannot play Anomaly for whatever reason, I feel like Stalcraft is probably the better alternative. However, if you can or do currently play Anomaly or some derivative of a mod pack for Anomaly, then I would just stick with that. I find that there's a way more dynamic experience with the single player world. No developer has come close to modeling something quite like A-Life. Now, A-Life does have its problems, but modders have really worked to make it better, to refine it, to make it behave in a way that makes the world actually feel alive. And that's the thing about Stalker. Stalker is the reason why it has such a cult following is because it has a unique world, it has a unique gameplay style, the world feels alive, and I don't think Stalcraft delivers that. And that's pretty much it. If you made it to the end of the video, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave a like, and if you also have played Stalcraft, feel free to leave a comment. I did actually make a Steam review on the game that goes a little bit more in depth, so I will try to link that in the video description if you want to read through it. This is not my game of choice to make content on, usually for most of you that are subscribed to the channel, but I decided to make a video on Stalcraft since, you know, I've been playing it for 100 hours straight pretty much. So anyways, guys, again, thank you so much for sticking around to the end, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.